So today's presentation, we are delighted to welcome Sean Hogan and Kate Bodin from the Portland Botanical Garden project. The title of today's talk is Connecting to Our Natural World.
For introducing our program today, Connecting to Our Natural World, the Portland Botanical Garden. It's my privilege to welcome today's speakers, Sean Hogan, who many of you know, and is the co-founder of the PBG and current board president, and also a new friend who I just met, who is the executive director, Kate Bodin. I was really happy when I had a chance to talk to Sean about this program, because the idea of this program really took me back to the beginnings of First Saturday, shortly after the opening of the Chinese garden, Lan Su. And that's been some 20 years ago. I would like to take a moment to share my reflections with you and also give a pre-shout to Sean. It was very exciting to be associated with the establishment of a new public venue in Portland, a classical Chinese scholars garden, whose origin was in Suzhou, China, beautiful and serene, and a retreat from the bustle of a busy and noisy city. I and the volunteers of the garden quickly learned when the garden opened that such a garden was the reflection, or was the reflective epitome of China's civilization, history, culture, and its Confucian and Taoist philosophies. There was so much more to learn to fully enjoy the garden. And that was the reason how First Saturday got started. When we look at the garden, we notice first the garden structure is clearly Chinese, with its whitewash walls and heavy dark curved tiled roofs with meandering pathways, corridors, pavilions, lake, leak windows, and bridges. But this was only one major aspect of a scholar's garden, which provided the structural form. A second significant part were the hidden meanings and poetry subject to interpretation in the many overhead inscriptions and parallel couplets, along with the abundance of symbolism throughout the design applications in the decorative aspects of the hardscapes. As an example, the name of our Chinese garden, Lan Su Yuan, is interpreted as the garden of the, the garden of the awakening orchid. Finally, there are the softscape elements of the garden expressed through water features and the selection of plants and trees that soften and enhance the beauty of the hardscape structures by adding color and texture, which create movement and shadows. Additionally, the selected plants needed to be compatible with the planting schemes historically found in Suzhou gardens. This was not an easy task. Sean was the primary person as the garden's curator to interact with the garden designer from Suzhou in determining the mix of appropriate plantings, along with finding such plants through his connection with botanists, gardeners, and commercial nurseries throughout Oregon. At that time, the importing of live plants from China was not allowed. Few accomplishments included the saving of several shore pines abandoned during the construction of the freeway overpass, the locating of several ancient Chinese magnolia trees, a juniper, and an osmanthus tree, all growing here in Oregon. The osmanthus tree was particularly special because it was symbolic of a person who successfully passed the difficult civil service examinations in China, thus qualifying the candidate for an appointment as a government official and achieving recognition as a scholar. The tree was found in a neighbor's yard. It was about 200 years with a root ball approximately the size of a Volkswagen. It had to be excavated, crated for shipping, and then lifted with a crane over the garden's southern wall for planting in the entry courtyard. We refer to this tree as Old Gui, named after the osmanthus flower in Chinese called the Gui Fa, which greeted the garden's visitors. During the autumn months, its fragrant blossoms perfumed the whole garden block. It was loved by everyone, but eventually met its demise after 15 plus years of giving pleasure to the garden's many visitors. Through lectures and plant tours with Sean, I learned about China as a mother of gardens. More kinds of diverse plants have been found in China than all of the other combined countries in the northern hemisphere of the world. In the Ice Age, there were many pockets, or I should say there was some pockets of terrain in China which weren't greatly damaged by the ice. New species are still being discovered today in China. Let me now turn the presentation about connecting to our natural world, the Portland Botanical Garden, to Sean Hogan and Kate Bodin. Please join me in welcoming them to First Saturday.
Hello.
Hi, good morning.
Good to be here. Good to see you, Dennis. I'll start here just for a second. It's really difficult to believe it's been 20 years, and equally difficult to believe that I actually started working on that project when I was only 3 years old. But alas, here we are. It's been an amazing learning process for me also, and what an opportunity to get to know absolutely amazing parts of our community. As a small aside, when Gui passed away a couple of years ago, we had cuttings, and there is now a cutting from that tree growing in the Scholars Courtyard. It's only about 6 feet tall, but there it is. So Old Gui is now New Gui that lives on. We have today a presentation that Kate is going to run through, and it's one we started making for some regional government folks a few months ago, and we're adding and tweaking to it. But it's an overview a bit of the proposed facilities and essentially gardens of what will be the Portland Botanical Gardens. And then we'll talk a little bit about some juicy details, and of course take questions. But I thought it'd be fun to see some renderings and things. And Kate, maybe can start here. She's in control of the machine.
I am in control. Yeah, I'll just run through it unless you want to do sort of an overview of what we hope to accomplish with this project.
Well, we could, yeah, I think that would be a good thing. It's funny that a city our size has no central botanical garden, although we have so many cultural gardens, and as I think all of you know, a lot of plant geeks. So really, we've been needing this for a long time. but everybody's busy. And it was only about 3 years ago, with so many of us thinking, oh, it'd be great, but who has time? And so things happened, and here we are, with dozens and dozens of volunteers doing various things, from websites to educational programming to you name it. All sort of, the big bang has happened, and now we're circling into some planets, I think. But really, what it comes down to for us is really a couple of fold. It's making sure that our population has the opportunity at all ages to fall in love with the natural world around them and become really engaged in it. And also, with Portland's so many communities, we're not all able to meet at the same bar right now. So what are ways we can make sure that every person that lives in our region has a reason to feel connected to where we live and to each other? And really, part of that, and a great tool, is through plants. And remember, years ago, 20 years ago, in beginning to talk to some of the docent groups, et cetera, at the Chinese Garden, everybody was just meeting each other. Many communities had not met. So many of the people in the communities just being involved in the garden. And it, of course, wasn't all comfortable. And I'll tell you, by the end of the first meeting, we're all talking about plants. And there's something about plants and gardening and nature that makes everybody pretty happy. So it went from a little uncomfortable to hugs in the matter of about an hour. So that's what we want to do for the entire city. And I'm calling that bonding over plants everybody's grandma grew. So there are so many reasons to do this. And one of the simple things we're calling it is one of Portland's, let's call it a horticultural speakeasy, where people can come and discuss, walk gardens, talk about plants or something else. And then it also comes to education. We'll have research, really strong pre-K, K through 12, college track. We really want to pump kids into universities. We want a lot of research, especially native plants, so many of our endangered habitats and the plants within them. And also a very, very strong vocational and extended learning process. And that is, we want to have the best gardening school in the country, we will say humbly, but we want to have it in 20 languages. We really want to make sure that everybody is part of not only building the garden, but everybody's off on the same foot. Everybody has the same opportunity to become not only a geek, but outstanding in the field of horticulture or botany. So it's a big bite, but we're pretty sure Portland can do this. So how's that for a quick prelude of the last 3 years' work?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah, feel free to chime in at any point here. We're currently in deep into land acquisition, which is we've been underway for I've been involved for about 2 years now, and Sean has, of course, had this idea for much longer time. And we have two co-founders, Sean and our other co-founder, Dan Pogast, who is in charge of marketing. And the core acquisition team, we're fortunate to have just amazing volunteers working with us. And some of these names you may recognize. The full acquisition team, and we'll get into what sites we're looking at, right? Well, without probably naming them specifically. But anyway, we're really, really grateful to have such an incredible community of probably, I think we figured out about 100 volunteers currently, as well as some pretty amazing partners who are very excited and working on this project, including Place Landscape Architecture, who's been doing some concept designs for us, and Post Testio Studio. It's been really terrific. Community partners, just a partial listing, and developing all the time, more and more people. So if you have anybody that you think is interested in working with us, we'd be delighted. So the dream, have you ever visited a botanical garden? Do you remember how you felt when you wandered through the conservatories, then the exhibits, and you could smell the green plants and how that made you feel? Imagine building a garden like that in Central City, Portland. So we're looking currently at a really gorgeous piece of land that has been underutilized for about 30 years now, and needs to be repurposed for the people of Portland. And it's in a neighborhood that's chronically lacking resources. So if you haven't been to a botanical garden, this might be sort of a generic vision of one. And actually, this would be a great place for you to talk about Walking the World, Sean, which is a great exhibition that you have planned.
Yeah, and with noses to the grindstone at the moment, there haven't been very many crayons put to paper yet as far as what very specific exhibits might look like. However, we're ripe for the picking, and everything from the fact that we do not have a native botanical garden here in the state to we don't have a large conservatory. So we're talking about as much as 250,000 square feet under glass, where people at any time of the year can be just exposed to the wonders of the world. And then we're really thinking of biogeographic, meaning these are different plant communities that happen all over the world that we can compare and contrast. So kids can see carnivorous plants and see a Venus flytrap, or weird succulents from South Africa that look just like the rocks they're growing in, or plants from Southern Oregon that only grow on one little mountaintop and look like the serpentine stone they're growing in. So things that we even have really in hand. Part of that is that there's also so much we can grow outside. And there's nothing like having a large botanical garden for people to stroll through, not to just enjoy the beauty, but to take note of all the things they could actually grow in their own gardens or expect to see in the streetscape. So here, of course, a very tropical place. The slide on the right, okay, that's my front yard. But the idea is that that's a Mediterranean planting of all the things that do so well here. So imagine some of these, almost unobtainable places under glass. Outside the glass, even whether it's metaphorical, would be the adjacent places in parts of the world we can grow these things outside. So, for instance, southern Vietnam all the way to Borneo, all these amazing tropical Pacific creatures that we can only dream of. And outside the glass, the things we can grow from, say, northern Vietnam, southern China, and elsewhere. And attached to that is, and something that's super exciting to me, is working with our existing gardens. And that is, for instance, both the Chinese garden and the Japanese garden are talking and showing about hundreds of years of art and culture and history. And then imagine leaving those garden walls and walking through woodlands and natural landscapes so we can see where these things come from. And on that note, the idea here is to bring many, many more people through our gardens. One of the first things we're asked at Sistis Nursery when people come to town is, where's your botanical garden? And now we're going to have an answer for that. So part of this is to be a bit of a center and to do what we're calling lift all boats. Let's bring a lot of people that are, even if they're garden tourists, through Portland, and make sure that it's not here only for our own communities, but that people get to see it and support it. So there's a little bit of that too. So that's a long explanation, but there we go.
A good one. So we'll bring together international partners in a mutual mission to conserve and protect the climate and botanical diversity throughout our programs and education. We'll become a United States Center for Plant Collections that will help to ensure the protection of diverse flora from threatened regions around the world. And our living collections will give researchers opportunities to study incredible specimens found nowhere else on the West Coast. And oaks, beautiful Oregon oaks. Imagine having a resource for trees and other plants most useful in adapting to our changing climate and cooling a warm day. Oaks are one of your favorites, Sean. Do you want to talk about oaks at all?
Only a little bit. Because
Only you get 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. I think one of the opportunities we have is for not only looking at plants in sort of natural associations, but in a naturalistic exhibit, we can, of course, kill, I don't know if killing a lot of birds is really a good analogy anymore, but we can certainly cover a lot of bases. And for instance, we'll have a lot of Mediterranean climate plantings as well as things from Western Oregon, of course, California, and elsewhere. And part of that are examples of trees that we should be using on our streets and in our gardens that are very low resource, really good for wildlife and other things. And there's just no place like, as all of you know, a public garden to see these things.
Exactly.
How's that for less than a minute?
It's perfect. Thank you. On a regional scale, PBG will serve as the botanical hub of the Pacific Northwest. In our exhibit, Traversing Oregon, which is another terrific Sean idea. Actually, why don't you take on to talk about it, since you're,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the main things is, we want everybody to fall in love with the world. And as we all know now, it's a harder thing to do than it has been. So one of the exhibits is what we call Traversing Oregon. And essentially, in a few hundred yards, somebody can start in the redwoods, go through the diverse Siskiyou Mountains, the dry western valleys, the Cascades, the northern Sonoran Great Basin Desert, and end up in the Rockies or our own Wallowa Mountains, and really get a cross-section of where we live. And then the other, of course, is so many habitats, plant communities, and you name it, from all over the world, and we can really do the same thing. And it's also, taking some of these floras, comparing the dry summer climates of southern South Africa to Australia to Chile to ourselves, and we can mix and match. And this is something that people usually have a really good time with, and it's not done very often.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you. So conservatories will work with local communities and businesses to create enriching temporary exhibits alongside our permanent displays. We're really passionate about involving underserved communities and providing them with a resource to share their cultures and values and histories, dedicated to forging educational partnerships through which we'll foster strong relationships with students, researchers, teachers, and volunteers. And we'll work with a multitude of nonprofit and educational organizations. We'll work with public and private K through 12 programs, colleges and universities, horticultural societies, gardening organizations such as the Master Gardeners, other local public gardens, and researchers. We'll offer programs like certifications and vocational training for landscapers and gardeners, and others, including multilingual professional training and professional development courses for teachers and industry professionals. And Sean, I thought maybe you might want to talk about your concept of the grass ceiling.
Yeah, well, absolutely. The whole concept here really is that it might be unfortunate that Portland doesn't have a large central botanical garden. On the other hand, we've gotten to think about this, and we might be able to do it in a really new way. Part of that is this is not going to be your grandfather's colonial botanical garden plunked down in Mumbai and saying, you do this, going to plant these in rows. This we really want to be built by the communities that are part of who we are. And also thinking about people, not only connecting them to the center, but so many communities that are underserved. And just as one example, the people that take care of our gardens right now, industrial, home gardens, you name it, 90-something% are from Mexico or Central America. There's very, very little training in Spanish or English or any native languages to take people from simply being told, go out there and prune that into a square and blow the parking lot off, and making that bridge into becoming sort of a card-carrying member of the horticulture community. And it really is a difficult thing to overcome. So we want all of these classes to be in, again, multiple languages, and a way that people leave the classes being part of the overall community, not just having learned something vocational. So I think that's, multiply that by so many people out over the city, and I think we're going to have a good time.
Terrific. So what can PBG do for Portland? So it will be a hub for connecting all of Portland's horticultural sources and gardens, thus vastly building visitorship to all. We'll bring heightened tourism to the city. We want regional, national, and international visitors. The garden will be a major landmark for the city, bringing tourists to experience the variety of gardens in Portland. Economic development will build upon the great local knowledge and expertise via green building, energy, and intertwine all with the greenery itself. Will be a hub for jobs, tourism, education, and training. And we have a deep educational mission, as we've just talked about, especially for underserved populations and those in the agricultural workforce.
I just saw, to interrupt here for one
No,
second,
good.
Jennifer. There was a question here in the comments, but all I saw was, how can this garden ... So I could answer and guess, but please feel free to jump in and ask that question, because I think questions and or heckling, or by whatever means, are super important here.
Any question popping up?
No, I didn't see it.
I can't see them.
Message
That's
box.
a question actually for the audience.
Mm. So the American Public Gardens Association Conference will be held in Portland in June 2022. And the city is also celebrating Frederick Law Olmsted's 200th birthday in April 2022. There are local and national celebrations being planned, and PBG could be a significant, well, we will be a significant participant. We think of PBG as another gem in Olmsted's emerald necklace of parks and gardens surrounding the city. We'll help to satisfy a desire to bring Portlanders to the river. We'll connect the East Bank Esplanade and Metro Greenways, in addition to serving as a catalyst for Metro and the city and their vision for a walking and bicycle path along the entirety of the river. It'll become a nexus for governmental, nonprofit, and private agencies involved in land stewardship. Will enhance Portland's reputation for having wonderful parks and gardens with ample public and pedestrian access, and will be a primary source of information and knowledge for all gardens and natural areas within the region, while functioning as a hub and a conduit to greatly increase access and visitorship to all of Portland's green institutions, and will be a gateway for understanding and monitoring the ecological health of the Willamette River Basin as we adapt to climate change. So current sites under consideration, which I'm sure everybody's really interested in. So this current site, one of the sites that we're looking at in central Portland along the Willamette, provides access to the Willamette and has a large amount of green space along the river. It's one of the very few places in the city on which a garden could be built. It would be a catalyst for linking the city to the waterfront, and multiple North Portland neighborhoods along the bluff are lacking access to the Willamette River. If there's anything you want to say, Sean, just pop in.
No, this is good. The audience can tell this is the part we actually have written and edited. So,
well, I know it's and it's, again, this is not a sealed deal yet, but it's looking promising. Let's put it that way. So it becomes a model for what can happen along the Willamette River. A success story would be inspirational for the environmental community and become a model to help inspire public uses. And we should have said this is actually a former Superfund site that's been remediated. And another view of the same. So it could perhaps be the first major redevelopment of the river, using the river as part of our system of parks. The garden would provide access to an interpretation of Portland's underutilized waterfront and interpret the greater importance of our fragile river systems, water system, and the vegetation and culture they allow. PBG offers a gateway to understanding more than 33 major plant communities and the hydrology of the entire Willamette River watershed. The majority of Oregon's population resides within 13 counties in the watershed. For instance, PBG could foster economic development in the nearby neighborhood of St. John's. Businesses may flourish with an influx of visitors and employees. So central city sites, we're currently intensely researching central city sites. Do you want to talk about that at all, Sean, with our partnerships?
well, I think the only very lightly, but
Yeah.
I think it's, in a greater sense, it's really important for Portland's existing institutions to be, one, knowing what everybody else is doing in as much as possible, but also part of this new endeavor. So we are talking to so many groups that really, frankly, have a lot to gain from having this as part of something they can use. So I think it's, we're trying to build slowly enough that we don't leave people we're talking to behind, because there are only so many of us. On the other hand, we want people to come and join and inform to the best they can if they're willing. So it's a building process, and sometimes it's just a matter of the time we've been able to put into it. There are only 16 or 18 hours in a day, right? So often it's somebody will find out about what we're doing through someone else and give a call and say, so this sounds like fun, how can I help? That kind of thing. So it's been really a fun process there.
Absolutely, which we welcome, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So rural interface site. And this would concentrate on savanna and riparian restoration, as well as vocational training. Do you want to talk about this, Sean?
Yeah, this is, so it's one of two sites. This one is a larger site that we are able to partner with some fairly large institutions. And so it is not only restoring, some of the 1% we have left of our oak savanna and grassland, but also riparian areas, and a good opportunity for very strong vocational training here, dealing with agriculture and actually growing plants on the site. So because of zoning, of course, we'll be growing things, and people will learn by taking care of them, and also planting and nurturing and all of that. So it's sort of, possibly a bit of a dual site, in which one is urban and very dense, and everybody's at one intense party, and the other is going to be a little more spread out, maybe a larger arboretum style planting, that kind of thing. But it will, again, cover more ground, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, and we view this. This is not obviously in Central City. It's a large acreage, and I think it will be a terrific opportunity for us to not only have an arboretum or a display garden, but because it's a zoned ag, we would actually be raising and selling plants to the public, as well as training, as Sean said, vocational training, but training our own workers, in fact. So renderings, this is by Place Landscape and Potestio Studio. So this is an example of what the collections tour could look like. And
I know it looks like a rose garden, but just remember it's a rendering.
Yeah, and I think this would be great. Do you want me to just read this, Sean, or do you want to talk about the outdoor collections?
Well, I think the outdoor, again, we'd have collections of plants from all over the world, both themed and natural, and of course, themes within natural collections. So I think it's endless right there. And we can guarantee that, just like this picture, there will be a lot of people pointing at things that we can't see in the picture.
Absolutely. And in fact, indoor collections also will focus on the preservation of endangered plants and directly connect people with rarefied and lovely environments from which all plants come, and showcase tender species bound to ignite the imagination. Think carnivorous plants, plants that look like rocks, plants that imitate animals, you name it. So this is the Lupin Meadow Tour. Recreating Willamette Valley grassland associations will give people a greater understanding and desire to preserve the 1% that remains. And conservatory, it's kind of hard to see here. These are renderings by Rick Potestio of possible conservatories. So this is and they're actually echoing the architectural lines of the Fremont Bridge. We estimate eventually that we'll build out about 125,000 square feet of the facilities, about 75,000 square feet of parking areas and outdoor event space. And our gardens will one day encompass between 50 to 80 acres of cultivated land. Just an example of what it might look like inside a conservatory, indoor conservatory. Contact information. Here's our website at the very top, https portlandbg.org, and both here's Sean's and my contact information. And we would really welcome any input. In fact, that's what we really want, is input on what you all would like to see in this garden, how it could serve you and your communities. We also welcome volunteers, and if you want to, you can go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, and we're about to start doing a series of newsletters soon. So it's on our splash page down in the right-hand corner. And if you're interested in volunteering, you can sign up there as well. And we'll be posting those opportunities in our newsletters. So anything you want to say? Yeah.
Sorry, I can add to that.
If
our little project continues and has the same feeling that the community putting together Lan Su created and what came from that, then Portland's going to be a very lucky place.
All right. So I think now we have plenty of time for questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for that great introduction to the Portland Botanical Gardens. We do have a couple questions, so let's get started. There's one question in the chat that I think you talked about, but if you have any additional comments, I think we can go ahead and discuss some more. The question comes from JJ. What piece of land is being considered and what would its footprint look like?
There are, I can take this one. There are a couple of pieces of land. We're still now, this is at the point where we still have to shrug our shoulders a little bit and try to change the subject because we're so close to, especially to, but possibly more, a number of partners, including the Port of Portland, have been so generous in helping with, the relatively few large chunks of land there are in our region. And I think we're not going to be specific now, if we're lucky, a few more weeks. But one's in North Portland, along the Willamette, and it has a history to it. And I think it would be a reclaimed piece of property. And the other is on the edge of ag land out next to Hillsborough. So I promise more. This sounds very politician-y, doesn't it? But we promise more and better and specific information on actual land coming up.
Thank you so much. Great. Let's see. Our next question. We've got some questions. I'm going to put them all together for some potential partnerships. Alex writes, as a member of the Oregon Botanical Artists, I'm wondering how to contact you, Kate and Sean. I think our organization could be part of your educational mission. So I did put in your contact information in the chat. So
yeah, that's terrific. We'd love to talk to you.
And most definitely, there is such a combination of the arts and horticulture and frankly wellness and conservation. And I think at one time all these things were considered rather separate, and they're by no means separate. So yes, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think that our contact information is in the chat as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question about a potential partnership. Is the Hoyt Arboretum involved? That comes from Elsa.
I can, not specifically, only in the fact that we're keeping them abreast of what we're doing. And I think one of the important exercises here is to complement what places like Hoyt are doing. There's of course no reason and every reason not to duplicate. So I think they would be yet another parallel institution.
Great. Roger also asks, any plans to interface with the Oregon Garden?
Not at this point. Sorry about the short answers.
A follow-up to that, and mentions that I'm concerned that the PBG will be confused with the Oregon Garden. How do you intend to make that clear distinction in the publicity?
Well, I think and if we're talking about the Oregon Garden down in Silverton, well, our roles and our vocations will really not overlap. So programmatically, there won't be any, again, any overlap. Visitorship, we want the tourism, of course, but we also really want this to be for the citizens of Portland. And many people, especially people that don't drive, aren't able to make it an hour and a half out of the city. So I think it'll become pretty clear pretty fast that they're both sort of automatic branding because of the different things we'll do. I don't think there'll be much confusion.
I want to chime in here too. I think something that we hadn't addressed is that one of our missions, really, or our philosophies, is to make sure that our garden is accessible to anybody who wants to come, and so that means transportation as well as financially. So, I think that will be a distinct difference from driving some ways to get to a garden.
Thank you.
There.
Let's see, we've got another question from Sylvia. Are you considering a complex that would include a central site easily accessible to Portlanders and visitors, plus secondary sites spread out through the area for specific types of horticultural activities? A good follow-up to what you were just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would behoove all of us to have a larger central site. And really, of course, we've got all these lists of criteria. Really important is that it's no more than one stop off major transit. So again, if you don't have a car, it's not tough to get to. We want to get people into the garden, and we also don't want there to be any hindrance as far as ability to pay. So we're sure that parts of it will have to be gated and feed, but then there'll be both a sliding scale, and we're going to make sure that if somebody doesn't have the cash to pay for it, they don't have to. So
Great, thank you so much. We have a lovely comment from Gwendolyn. You could also, you could allow an outdoor school, outdoor preschool actually. And she's got a website. I'll make sure to pass that on to
terrific.
Oh, great.
to help connect children and their parents.
That's great. We're actually our educational programming is in the drafting stage right now. So it's terrific to have. In fact, if anybody's interested in joining that team, we'd love to have your input.
Just to follow up on that, if anyone is interested, feel free to put your email in the chat and we'll make sure that gets passed on.
Great, thank you.
Another great comment from Jeff. Portland is indeed lucky to have your vision and community connections devoted to such a project. I will sign up for the newsletter and join your cause.
Yay, thank you.
It's a very nice thing to say.
Yeah. We've got a question that's from Sabina. Which state has the best botanical gardens that's worth the trip to visit?
Oh my goodness. What? All of them. Good. I'm in North Carolina at a botanical garden right now. So, you've got UC Berkeley, which is not very far away, and it's one of the best in the world. You've got Huntington in Los Angeles, which is also stunning. I think the interesting thing a little bit about our own history is, for instance, California has land grant botanical gardens with most schools. For whatever reason, Oregon did not do that in its university system. So in a way, we're making up for a little lost time. In that state, as much as we like to bash California, almost every major town, you can take a walk to the local botanical garden and learn a lot. And so, we're just trying to catch up a little bit here. But I think Atlanta Botanic Garden is amazing. If you're in the Rocky Mountain area at all, Denver Botanic Garden is absolutely stunning. Desert Botanic Garden in Arizona, University of Washington Arboretum and Botanical Garden in Seattle, UBC Botanical Garden in Vancouver, BC, and on and on and on. It really is an endless source of both entertainment, and you just learn the most amazing things. And
I'm currently in New Mexico, where we have the Albuquerque Biopark and the sweet Santa Fe Botanical Garden as well, where the
So,
sun is shining.
plant, a lot of good ones.
Absolutely.
Great recommendations there. Thank you. Another question comes in from Gretchen. We saw quite a few photos of large glass houses. Are you planning for earthquakes?
Well, it's funny with some of the land we've looked at, which is actually on brownfield sites, we'd have to build rather shallow construction anyway. So first, we've been joking a little bit about building bouncy castle conservatories that are completely earthquake proof. But yes, everything we're thinking about is, we have to talk about everything from liquefaction of soils to the 9.3 off the coast to you name it. So a lot of engineering is involved for sure.
Great. Sylvia is also chiming in that Chicago Botanical Gardens in northern Cook County is a great facility.
Yes, absolutely. That's one we've used Chicago Botanic Garden as a little bit of a parallel to what we're doing with their programs. And we've also looked at the fact that it's 30 miles from Chicago. So it is an effort to get there. And it's one of the reasons even Kew in London isn't right in London. So we're doing our best to make sure that what we're doing is as central as possible.
Great. We have a couple questions about this. So both Elsa and Suzanne ask, where are you getting the funding from? Is there any funding from the state or the federal government? And also to build and maintain the garden?
Right. This is going to be a major capital campaign. Right now, we're mostly focusing on, actually, before we've even asked, smaller donations that have been really amazing, funding smaller projects. Almost everything we're doing right now is pro bono, but there are interns and expertise that we have to pay for. Some people do have day jobs. And so we are feeling that we will really ramp up the capital campaign when we have land solidified, as it were. And that's coming up pretty quickly. We're getting lots of very kind offers.
Yeah.
Great. Let's see here. Another question from JJ. You mentioned the North Portland site is a former Superfund site. What challenges does that present?
Do we have a couple hours here?
It's very complex.
It is all challenges and 5 hours a day of Zoom meetings. However, we really collectively, it's a nice thing about our board and the people that are and have gathered around is that it's super collaborative, and we're really not doing things that we're disagreeing on, or expertise in communities is telling us otherwise. And I think all of us have felt that the repurposing of a piece of land we have not treated well right in the midst of our city, and a rebirth into something that's an attraction and a learning place and a place of joy for the whole city is one of the most important things we could do, and frankly worth all the extra effort it is to try to do it there. That might be a little generic, but
do people know what Superfund site is?
Well, certainly it's a place we've done bad things.
Bad things, so bad that the federal EPA comes in and designates it as a Superfund site.
Right. So this is part of the Willamette Harbor Superfund oversight.
Yeah.
And so a couple of spots we're looking at have actually been remedied, but that means there are limitations as to what we can build, at least on parts of the site. So we would actually be part of the healing process. But it's essentially, everything from chemicals that have leaked to you name it, that, we're making now a major effort of cleaning up along our river.
Fortunately, this site has been completely remedied. but that has its own challenges as well. So,
Sure.
but it's a beautiful story. I mean, that's, I think that the current owner as well is, what better to take some land that was so badly damaged and turn it into a beautiful place where people can come and be in nature along the Willamette.
Yeah.
And it's not the only Superfund site on the Willamette, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
We, as a city, have not maybe
No.
embraced our waterfront the way we might. And this is actually a relatively rare opportunity to have people right at water.
Absolutely. That's great.
No hardball questions at all?
No, not at all. Just wait.
Yeah.
Suzanne asks, or says, and asks, of course you have a great deal to do, but is there and will there be an outreach to national or ethnic groups, since different groups are familiar with certain plants because of the geographic area they come from or use in their cuisine? It would be good to have the support of those groups in the creation of the garden. And then also, if you have specific examples of plants you'd like to speak on, that would be great.
Oh my goodness. Well, the answer, of course, is yes. And we're, like any of these projects, we're kind of starting with people we know, because you can make a quick phone call to someone you know who has whatever background to say, hey, what do you think about this? And so we've started mostly with local groups, but also really we are reaching out and are having offers from all over the world. So it's not going to just be of local reach. And I think because of Portland's culinary scene, because of the absolute richness of people we have cooking amazing things and bringing family and historic dishes to the front, can you imagine how that could interface with a public garden? And this is where these things come from. Everything from demonstrations to first making sure that anybody who cares to, and if they don't come up and help, we're going to make them do it, informs how we display these things, and how not only can we sort of strengthen our own cultures, but share with all the other cultures that are around us. We find out as much we have in common as we do differences. And I think I've told this story a number of times, but having a nursery, some years ago, we were growing a baby fig tree that had been collected in Afghanistan. And I had little plants planted out, and someone came in, and I saw them in a distance literally fall to their knees. And they were just getting all emotion over this little plant that's less than a foot tall. So he came in and he said, I grew up in the Afghanistan-Iran border. My dad and I would go out and pick figs in the fall. And he said, frankly, sometimes the figs weren't very good, but the smell of the fig leaves, the smell of the air, the activities, that was what was important. And of course, I gave him a fig tree. We didn't have any for sale yet. And that created a bond between both him and his family and the nursery forever. They would come in and buy plants during the recession that they probably didn't want or need, but they wanted to be supportive. So I want to see that in our garden 1,000 times over, because of just all the multiple connections that can be made by sitting around talking about plants and what we used to do with them,
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great.
one example.
Yeah, I should also mention that we are in the process of developing what do we call it? Community outreach committee, I think, or something. But it will be representatives of all cultures around the city. And if anybody's interested in that particularly, we'd love to have your help. We want to reach out to as many communities as we can.
Awesome. Thank you. I've got some more questions coming in. I love it. Sabina asks, will the Leach Botanical Garden in Portland be integrated with the PBG?
As one of Portland's oldest public spaces and gardens, we certainly hope so. I'm a huge fan of the history of that place. Lily Leach and her explorations, she's always been a hero of mine. And, essentially there's not only shared programming, there's funneling people into our other gardens and the programs they're doing, thereby expanding all the programs. But I'm also looking at it, isn't it cheaper to go to Staples and get a whole bunch of paper clips instead of every garden having to get their own? It's kind of that kind of thing. So we want to be really part of, if not instigating, network between all of our gardens. So we're just funneling more people through all of them. There are still people in Portland that don't know that Leach exists, for instance, strangely enough. And I think we could be a big tool in making sure that's not the case.
Great. Going back to the Superfund site, Roger asks, is there any Superfund money available for the Portland Botanical Garden?
The answer is maybe. We're not quite there yet, but it's, these negotiations are complex and there are all kinds of mathematics going all over the place. So that's something I think we'll know hopefully within 3 to 6 months.
That's exciting. It's exciting to hear.
That's a generic answer, but I can tell you it's like 10,000 conversations and possibilities rolled into 10 seconds.
It's true.
Definitely, for sure. We've got another question. We're getting into it now. So Rachel asks, what is the timeline for various steps in creating this garden?
Kate, you want to?
Well, yeah, we're very much hoping that we're going to be able to announce the land acquisition in, what did we say? Well, we were saying the end of the year. My guess is it may be more like spring, 3 to 6 months. Yeah. And then we start, and we have, of course, there's both properties and it's possible that they could happen about the same time. And then we start reaching out for capital campaign and finishing up starting the planning, I guess. We've got concept plans for both sites, but we'll have to get into doing some serious engineering and architectural renderings and so on and so forth. So, but I think that if we do have the land within 3 to 6 months, I don't know, when would we open our doors? I mean, it's conceivable, within 2 years, I think. What do you think?
I tend to be one of the optimists in this group.
I know, me too.
I'll slap down a little bit. But,
yes, somebody should stop me.
There's no reason we couldn't have shovels in the ground and signs up and programs going actually rather quickly, a couple of years.
Yeah. It may not be a full-on, fully, maybe just a smaller central core garden, but we hope to open really soon. It's also sort of a generic answer, sorry. It really all hinges on the acquisition of the land, it really does. And then as soon as we've got that nailed down, everything explodes, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, it's always, it's linear, so.
It is linear.
Sort of.
Yeah, can't do much without land.
Betsy has left a lovely comment. She says, this is very exciting. Thank you for sharing about it. Consider me a helper.
Yay, thank you, Betsy.
Please get in contact.
Betsy, we've got your name now. Another question comes from Megan. Will there be a way for people to access the riverfront without paying the entrance fee and entering the garden?
This is something we've, of course, had a lot of discussions about because we want open space and water access to be free and open. So right now it's looking like, yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Next question comes from Elsa. Do you have an office or current working space in Portland yet?
It's called Zoom.
It's your home office.
Zoom and a post office box. No, actually we don't, but we do tend to meet out at Sisters Nursery a lot when we're not Zooming. It's actually amazing what we've managed to accomplish in a year, 18 months of pandemic by Zoom remotely. It's pretty incredible.
We were able to have a couple of our first get-togethers this summer, both as thank yous to people that are helping us, and also there are parts of our team that we'd only met over Zoom.
Mm.
So yeah, I've got to say that people have done an amazing amount from their own cubbies. So
yeah, we have an entire marketing team that we hadn't met any of by this summer. In fact, they're doing an entire rebuild of our website right now. It's all remote. It's amazing. But if you want to visit us, we'd be happy to entertain you outside.
Sounds good. Our next question comes from Sabina. Portland has quite a few sister cities internationally. Are any of them involved in your fundraising efforts, or have you considered involving them?
that is super exciting. And early on, even when the Chinese garden was under construction, I remember a lot of discussions going on about that. And parallel, a lot of friends in various communities, a friend of mine was saying during that period of time, why isn't there a Vietnamese garden? And my only answer could be, because you're not building one. And now he's back in touch and bringing a lot of his peeps into the picture and all of that. So right now we're concentrating on our own communities and what they want to see in this place. What every person, what bench is going to be yours and where you're going to sit, and all of that. But the prospect of working with our sister cities is, I think, really spot on.
Great. I love hearing about all the potential connections that can be.
It's kind of endless, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. Another question. Do you have any particular plants that you have been dreaming of bringing to Portland? And anything that
Don't get them started.
Any particular plants, plural, that you're passionate about that you'd like to see in our Portland Botanical Gardens?
Sometimes doing a project like this, it's an exercise in self-control. I want to be making plant lists and reaching out to connections around the world and bringing in things so bad. But, right now it's no, got to talk to this person about land or whatever. But, people are gathering around us with a lot of expertise and a lot of loves. Our co-founder, Dan Pogust, is an expert in passion flowers, for instance. And so we're pretty much guaranteed to have the world's largest collection of both endangered and interesting and useful passifloras. And so often these places are a collection of what people bring to it. But practically, for instance, for Portland, looking at our gardens using fewer resources, we'll have really large collections of, for instance, Mediterranean plants, everything from manzanitas to ceanothus to examples of what we should be using on our streets. I happen to really love various types of oaks. And so, we plan on having the world's largest collection of evergreen oaks. Well, why not? We can hope. But there are so many things. And I'd also say how many plants could we cram into the Chinese garden? Only so many. And can you imagine the collections that could be outside of that? And just the exquisite flora, species camellias collections and gardenias and osmanthus, gui, and so many things that we have room for one symbolic, beautiful creature in the Chinese garden. But how about if we have a grove of 30 different types that people can walk among and learn about? So yes, I could go on for hours. So always happy to communicate about that.
Well, we've got time. No, I do have some more questions. This one comes from Ling. can you tell us more about how you intend to create the international and multicultural horticultural areas of the garden?
Areas, did you say?
Yes.
Well, I think the designs have yet to happen, but I think the general concept is that as one is strolling the gardens, we have a lot of regional places. There are parts of the world that are too tropical for us to grow things outside, so those would be inside, and probably a bit more stylized because we won't have as much room inside as outside. But there's room for a lot of really, really important plants. So not only things that one would sort of find sort of in an ambient part of the world, but things that are particularly beautiful, have particularly interesting natural adaptations, and then of course things that have been traditional foodstuffs or ceremonial plants, all kinds of things. So you know, people can see what the plant that they've been eating for years actually looks like. And within that, I think one of the exciting things is there's going to be a lot of room for human cultural interpretation. And so that is where, for instance, art and dance and
Music.
storytelling, and most importantly for me, food is come in. And it's what we need to design into the garden is that it's integrated into the garden. And so it's not just a display, but it's part of the whole personality of the place. So, and of course, that's why we need these things to be built by our communities before they're actually in mortar yet.
Great, thank you so much. We've got more questions, but we are a little winding down, but let's see. They keep coming in, so this is great.
Wow.
Megan asks, will it be possible to plant food plants on a former brown site?
Yes, we've talked a lot
Good
about
question.
that. I think psychologically, on a brownfield cap, we probably won't be planting greens, even though it's mitigated and all the soil above it will be, unpolluted. So I think the generic answer is yes, because we will have so many things such as areas off of that site and a lot of containers and raised beds and all kinds of things. So anything being grown there that we would eat would, of course, be grown in pretty good ground with a lot of testing.
Thank you so much for that answer. It looks like we are out of questions, and we still got some more time. So, oh no, I spoke too soon. Another one just popped up. So I'm going to ask this one. JJ asks, is there a plan to feature plants used by our Indigenous communities?
Of course. That has been a really fun prospect. And in the way, a couple of these sites are just, there's such a rich cultural heritage there. A lot of these sites are, they're on the water, very close to Savi Island, and such a rich native history there. Really, the way we would like it to be portrayed is that, for instance, native cultures aren't sort of a picture in black and white, like this happened then, but a continuation of history. And I've told a few people this, but I got this from my grandfather, who was Miwok and Nez Perce, who knew of all the goings on Savi Island. He grew up in Forest Grove. He knew what went on out there over the years, over the thousands of years. People met on Savi Island every summer, a lot of people. And I guess I would tell you that Burning Man did not start in Nevada. And aside from that, he still remembered stories of family names and intrigue and, everything that happened. So we want to engage and to be engaged with in a way that makes local culture and local ancient culture part of the continuum. And we don't know how we're going to do that yet. And I'm expecting and hoping we'll be told. So that's exciting to me.
Absolutely. That sounds great. Our next question comes from Jeff. Does your practice and study include the role and benefits? Ooh, I like this question. Excuse me. Let me try that again. Does your practice and study include the role and benefits for the fungal mycelia in both plant thriving and perhaps brown area cleanup?
The answer is way yes. So important in both natural settings and horticulture, the mycorrhizal associations of plants. On a practical level, we're not going to be feeding anybody truffles from a brownfield site, but on all other levels, it is interesting here because the site is capped. So I don't know whether the officials that have actually done the capping are using anything mycorrhizal within the cap itself. I'd like to find that out. But as far as gardens and natural mycorrhizal associations, yes, for a bazillion reasons, if not the most important, that a lot of our native and other plants grow in very sterile soils, and they are reliant upon their natural fungal associations to be able to fix nitrogen or, essentially to assimilate the surroundings they're in. So without going into it too much, you betcha.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to try this again because we are out of questions, but if anyone has more, feel free to, put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we can definitely still answer them. If not here we can do it at the tea house. But in the meantime, for Sean and Kate, if you have any last comments you'd like to add or say anything, we'd be happy to hear it.
Kate.
Just to say once again, we would love to have you help us in any way you would like to. And the easiest way is probably to email me, honestly, or sign up on our website for our mailing list. And but if you want to email me, feel free to. I'd love to get you involved.
Ditto here. We want input.
But don't email Sean.
I know she doesn't ever answer my emails. I do. It just takes a while.
Email me and I'll ask him.
No, please. I mean, really want to be involved and in touch. And to me, it's also super exciting to sort of make a more formal connection with the people that have been involved over the years in the Chinese garden, because that is the very spirit that we want to continue with this project. So please, comments, questions, insults, whatever, bring them on.
Ideas.
Yeah, please.
Volunteers, support, whatever.
Great, thank you. And a quick shout out to Sylvia. We did see your email to be added to the email list, so I will make sure that Kate gets that.
Terrific, thank you.
Yeah.
It'd be really fun to hear from people.
Yeah, it would be. In fact, it won't be a garden without everybody's input, really.
Well, and by the way,
sorry, go ahead.
I mean, this includes, if you think you've got an idea that's a bit of a wild hair, don't think it is, because we have a chance. We're starting from scratch here, and that's really going to be a fun thing. And this is going to be a Portland thing. So everybody out there needs to help make it that.
Great. I love it. Oh, well, Sean, Kate, thank you so much for speaking with us this morning and answering all those questions. And to the audience, thank you for all those great questions. Yeah, I just want to really quick remind everyone that we have, oh, thank you for my slide. Want to remind everyone of our next month's program, which will be a talk on our Lan Su Chinese Garden and the vision of how that garden looks. And it's going to be presented by Justin Blackwell, who's the horticulturist on staff with the Lan Su Chinese Garden. excuse me. Registration will be up for that in the next day or so, and we'll get out more information on the website, which is www.firstsaturdaypdx.org. Slide, please. And then just a reminder that we're going to go into our tea house. We've got a couple minutes, so I encourage everyone who's able to attend to go grab a cup of tea and a little snack, and then join us in the tea house. Remember that you do have to log out of the webinar and click on that second link that was in your registration confirmation emails or your reminder emails. On the screen, you can see it's going to just scroll down to the second link and then join us for the tea house. So again, thank you all for coming. Sean, Kate, you got
Thank
feel
you.
free to add anything.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. All right, this has been so great. And thank you all for attending. Kate, Sean, again, thank you so much for speaking with us. And we hope to see you all in a few minutes at the tea house.
We'll be there.
Bye.
Bye-bye.